Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Ryan McGinley. We're here to chat through lots of Celtic news and chat and transfers, and you know what it's all about by now. It's August. It's early August, Ryan. The season has started. Yeah. I don't think I've been on since Celtic played St Mirren on Sunday, so I'm very excited the season started. There's lots of talk points. There's lots of things ongoing. Lots of little bits here and there. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of Storm Floris in my garden, which caused absolute havoc for me yesterday, crashing and chaos in my garden. So I've been dealing with the fallout for that. How are you on this fine Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm doing not too bad. We've not really had any storm damage in Coatbridge, just outside Glasgow, so we're doing okay. There was a couple of cows that were released into the wild, or not into the wild, into the public domain near where I live, so maybe that was the extent of the damage. But apart from that, it's been okay on my end. Crazy weather at this time of year. You know, you've got the sun's out. I mean, I'm looking just outside just now, and the sun's out, but it's also windy, so it's like four seasons in the one day. More action going on outside than seems to be happening for Celtic in the transfer window. I think the fact that we're talking about the weather in the opening 2 minutes of the podcast would suggest how exciting it is on the Celtic front.
Yeah. We're going to, by the way, everyone join us in the live chat. Lively already, lots of comments, questions already getting fired at us. We're happy to take questions today and have a bit of a Q&A later if that's what it calls for. So if you have any burning questions for us, do fire them in. We've got some early ones already that tie into what we're going to be talking about initially today, Ryan. And everyone's obviously got this transfers in their head. I think it's important just to lay out exactly what we're actually expecting to happen, not what definitely will happen, but just the expectation of what's going to happen these final few weeks. Now, we know from previous years that Celtic can do a lot of business in these final weeks of the season. They've laid a lot of groundwork in moving players out this summer, which I think a majority of that has been positive. Nicholas Kuhn and Greg Taylor could have played a squad role with Kieran Tierney in the squad this year, and him leaving wasn't particularly ideal. Nicholas Kuhn, Celtic got good money and it was a good deal, but again, it weakens the starting 11. The rest of the outgoings have been fairly good from Celtic's perspective because they needed to reduce those squad numbers and kind of some of the deadwood around there from previous transfer windows, 2023 in particular. So there's more outgoings expected though, Ryan, and this is what I want to touch on first because when you look at the Celtic squad and you consider some of Brendan Rodgers' comments in recent times, for me, there's still 2 or 3 out of the kind of pre-season first-team squad group that could end up leaving Celtic and making way for others. So one of those, I think, without question, is Stephen Welsh. It seems he is destined to leave Celtic this year. Dane Murray's kind of usurped him as that kind of more prospect kind of defender that can play a squad depth role, and there's always been a fair amount of interest in Stephen Welsh from clubs around Europe, to be honest, who like his profile, like his physical ability and his ball playing ability. Not quite got it enough for Celtic, I would suggest, but it seems Stephen Welsh would be one of those leaving. I'm just going to run through another couple now. People might shout at me here, but I still feel, my feeling is, in my opinion, and I don't know this for sure, I've still got a feeling that Hayato Inamura will head out from Celtic on loan, mainly based on what Brendan Rodgers said on Friday. He was kind of asked about how he'd done in that role in pre-season, and he said, in fairness to the boy, as I said, his plan was that he'd come in and then probably go out on loan. I mentioned that right at the very beginning. That was the plan for him. He's coming in quote well, but we'll see over the coming weeks where we're at. To me, that feels like Brendan Rodgers is still in the market for a left back. Then you look at Callum Osmond, who could potentially go out on loan as well, who Johnny Kenny, Shin Yamada, Adam Ida kind of all ahead of him in the pecking order. If we're thinking of Celtic signing more attackers, then it just makes sense for Callum Osmond to go out on loan immediately and get some football under his belt. So those are the 3 initially that I'm just thinking still could leave Celtic this summer. I don't know how you feel about those 3 in particular.
I think those 3 are the 3 that could do with a move away from Celtic, both For their individual circumstances, some of them could do with a loan deal to get game time, while others, specifically, I would say Stephen Welsh, would be better with a permanent deal because, he's 25 years old. He needs to carve out a career for himself, unless he wants to stay and be, fifth, sixth choice defender at Celtic. I'm sure he probably doesn't want that, and he wants to get games under his belt. He probably still has hopes for an international career, and which wouldn't be out of the question if he goes to Belgium or the likes, or somewhere similar to that, Plymouth, Argyle. I look at Jack Hendry, and he went out on loan and then went out on loan, and then he went permanently, and he managed to resurrect his career, and now he's a bit of a Scotland stalwart. Maybe Stephen Welsh isn't in the same quality level as Jack Hendry, but you never know, and he just needs solid game time under his belt. He in the 2020-21 season, due to circumstance and due to necessity, he got a lot of game time, and then he did get some game time the following season under Ange Postecoglou. But since then, it feels as if his career's been on pause, and he needs to get out somewhere, preferably on a permanent deal, to resurrect his career and get some first team football under his belt. What is it? It's something like 60, 65 appearances for Celtic in 5-6 years. He should probably have more than that, and he would have had more than that if he was at a different club, in my opinion.
And the three that I mentioned, it doesn't really stop there. Marco Tilio, again, looks like he's on the verge of leaving the club when it gets sanctioned, so to speak. And even Johnny Kenny, if Celtic are signing another striker, then it might not make sense to have Johnny Kenny around either. So that's another 5 players that could leave Celtic over the next few weeks. And who does that make room for, Ryan? Well, we know that, there's a lot of people asking about Simpson Pusey this morning. Where is Simpson Pusey? What's going on with Simpson Pusey? Hazel Finn asking, what's the hold up with JSP? Was a boy staying still? No sign of us getting Pusey. What's going on? So we know Simpson Pusey's here. So Brendan Rodgers said after the game on Sunday that they're still waiting for clearance on the Simpson Pusey signing. Now, I'm not sure if that's the Man City end. I'm not sure if it's like this kind of international clearance thing, but it seems like there's just a little bit of a hold up now. What we know is obviously Simpson Pusey is in Glasgow. Everyone saw him at the game, but I think he was also involved in a little bit of training post-match at Celtic Park on Sunday as well. So he's in and around it and involved. It's just not, Celtic won't announce it until everything's fully signed off and the I's are dotted and the T's crossed. But he did his kind of pictures and things as well at the weekend, I believe. So it's not. It's all in the works, is what I'm saying, and I guess it's just one of those ones we have to be patient on. Simpson Pusey coming in, then so if Inamura leaves, another left back, Ryan. So that's someone we would need, and then I would say 2 wingers. Celtic need 2 wingers, and potentially another striker. It depends what the makeup of those wingers is and what the kind of flexibility I would suggest there. And then for me, it's and that's the thing for me. I don't think it's a massive ask for Celtic to deliver at. It's not a massive amount of players I think we need to bring in. It's just 2 or 3 quality players who can come in and energise the group and add a bit of quality and competition to what we have, and then Celtic will move forward in pretty good shape.
Yeah, they need to replace the players that have gone, to be honest. Nicholas Kuhn, okay, fair enough, he wanted to leave the club. That's absolutely fine. He's well within his rights to demand that and go for a good move to Como, an ambitious club in Serie A. You need to replace him. You need to replace him not just with personnel, but with the numbers that he's left the club with. As I've said in numerous podcasts over the past 2-3 weeks, double digits in goals and assists, they've got to be replaced. You've already lost. I know you're going back to last season, but Matt O'Reilly's double digits in goals and assists. You take away Kyogo halfway through the season. You take away Nicholas Kuhn in the summer. The 3 of them were contributing a lot of goals and assists under Brendan Rodgers. Nicholas Kuhn, if he'd kept up his first half of the season form, would have probably been a shoe-in for Player of the Year. Yes, he dropped off, but the numbers were still there. The numbers were still relatively consistent, and he was making an impact in games, particularly big games, against the likes of Bayern Munich, RB Leipzig, etc. So there needs to be a player that comes in there. If you can't find a player that can do that on his own, then I would agree with you and bring in 2 wingers that can, soften that blow of losing Nicholas Kuhn. But I think Celtic just need volume wingers. I also think they can't take any chances with Jota. They need to allow his rehabilitation to go as smoothly as possible and not rush him back. Even if that means he hardly kicks a ball. then they need to bring in somebody else
Yeah,
for that volume on the
that's
left
a
hand
decent
side.
point. You can't really mess about with those types of injuries, those kind of length
No.
injuries, and there can be complications along the way. It is something that Celtic need to, I think, legislate for before the end of the transfer window, like undoubtedly for me, and that's why I'm saying it we need two, and I think it just takes a bit of the pressure off Yang. For me, I think Yang and Adamida have been caught up on this kind of transfer frenzy, as in the unrest around transfers is they're now in the focal point of that, and I'm not absolving the performances on Sunday. It's more that because they weren't great on Sunday, it's all heightened and it's all more emotional around what their performances are, just because of what the transfer situation is. I think Jan can still be an impact player for Celtic. He might get moved on. I don't know, but like I think he could still play some sort of squad role. He's not a starter for Celtic at the moment. Just no way for me, and nowhere near it. To be frank, I thought he was very poor on Sunday, and he was just very safe, and he looked unconfident and uncertain with himself, and I don't think that's a great place for a player to be, especially with all this noise going on around that position. And I thought just James Forrest coming into that match really added a spark and energised the team. And I would be, I know Yang had a good game at Pataudry last year, but I really want to see James Forrest in that team at the weekend, because yeah, and that's where we're at, Ryan, and that's why there's this urgency for transfers. The transfers will come. The transfers will come, I think. And as we said there, we're laying out there. It's three, I think. Three good signings, two wingers, and a potentially left back if Rodgers fancies moving in and Mura on. Some will say we would really need a quality striker. I think if we get two quality wingers in, I think that might be enough. And then we can try and figure out what we're doing with the striking position as we go, if we see more of Shin Yamada. If Rodgers fancies, and listen, if Rodgers doesn't fancy Shin Yamada at all, then we do need another striker. Like, that's just as Rodgers says, that's basic arithmetic, Ryan.
Yeah, I would argue that Celtic needs a striker anyway for the Champions League this season. And unfortunately, and Brendan Rodgers has made these comments saying that it's difficult to find, it'll be easier for Celtic to find a quality winger than a quality striker. That might be true, but money certainly does help when recruiting top quality strikers. Celtic have obviously got money in the bank. It's public knowledge that they've got money in the bank, and I feel as if I've got more and more doubts in my head about Adamida, if I'm being perfectly honest, about the player and whether he can be that starting striker for Celtic. Because if he can't be the starting striker at Celtic, then you've got a player that you've signed for £8-9 million. Now, he didn't decide to be an £8-9 million player. That was Celtic that paid that money. That was Norwich that asked for that fee for the player. So, but he will have that pressure on him because Celtic have signed that, and people will be expecting a goal return from him this season and more effective play. There was a highlights clip going out about yesterday, and it was every touch that Adamida had against St Mirren, and there was some good points, but there was a lot of passages of play where he was just wasteful, whether that was his finishing or his passing or his build-up play. I just feel that position, if in an ideal world, Celtic would go out and sign a top quality striker that will score you 25, 30 goals a season. And I know that Brendan Rodgers has said he doesn't want that from just one player in the team, but my goodness, it would be helpful to have somebody that can have that link between the midfield and up front, as well as score those goals. I've just got reservations about Adamida at this moment. I'd love to be proven wrong, but at the moment I can't shake the doubts that I've got in my head about him leading the line for Celtic, and Sunday didn't help that, unfortunately.
I understand. I understand it. I do. I totally understand it. I'm trying to think realistically of what Celtic can still do in these closing weeks of the window, and
it's an ideal world situation.
Yeah, ideal world
John.
versus reality kind of thing. And we know Celtic have good resources, but this there's I just have worries about Celtic being that ruthless in the transfer market with a player of Ida's status in the lineup. Not really how he's functioning week to week at the moment, but just given the context around his arrival and the money spent on him and etc. I think, and I guess we'll see. I'm just trying to think of what Celtic stance will be, and it's not really what my stance is. I'm just looking at, are Celtic going to bring in another striker, and at that level without first moving Ida on. Is basically what I'm trying to say.
Because Rodgers has been asked that question as well, and in the past couple of responses, when he's been specifically asked about bringing in a striker, he then talks about the forward areas.
Yeah,
he talks about the forward areas and not just someone through the middle. So that would maybe go to your point that they're going to be looking for wingers to bring that volume rather than another striker coming through the door, which I still think is important. I still think they need quality wingers, especially in the 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1 that Rodgers plays. But in an ideal world, a striker would be recruited as well.
Brown Warrior saying there's a 30-goal striker at the club. We need wingers to move Dyson back as the first choice striker. I think there's an element of that too. Like I do have a fair amount of confidence that Dyson can be that force through the middle if needed. Again, not an ideal situation, but he did prove himself in the second half of last season, and that needs to be a consideration too. And it's something that people are quick to forget because they always want the new thing, they always want the new player. But I think if quality wingers come in and add threat and creativity to that front line, then I don't think too many people will grumble too much with Dyson Media as the central forward in that Celtic attack. So I'm going to bring in some comments here because there's been a lot of chat in the comments. It's very lively today, and a lot of good comments that we kind of need to address. Pete McGee asking, John, we 100% at least one quality centre back, probably two. I think with the Simpson Pusey, the design there is that once Simpson Pusey in, I don't actually have too many concerns about the defence if he is the advertised product, if you will. With Carter Vickers and Pusey there, you've got Liam Scales and Austin Trusty. Now I know Liam Scales and Austin Trusty aren't everyone's cup of tea, but again, I'm trying to look at it from the club's perspective. They're looking at players who performed well in Champions League last year, who are trusted by Brendan Rodgers to an extent. I think he trusts Scales more than Trusty sometimes, which is fair enough. I think unless one and another one leaves, I just can't see Celtic adding to that pool. Now, in an ideal world, I'm stocking the squad full of the most quality players possible. But from just a numbers perspective, I just can't see Celtic adding another centre back onto Brendan Rodgers' options if Simpson Pusey arrives.
It would be too busy if they, in this current iteration of the defensive backline, it would be too busy, and there's too many players to accommodate, unfortunately, which would mean, and I agree with your point, that one of them would likely move on. You would tend to put your money on Trusty rather than Scales, because Scales started the first game of the season. He can come in and out of the squad. He's quite happy to play that rotational role, given where he's maybe not so much now because he's had that taste of first team football over the past couple of years, but he has been in and out of the squad the past couple of years. He has had a lot of appearances, but he's happy to come in and out when required. My hope and my expectation with the grumblings around Simpson Pusey is that he comes in and immediately takes that spot alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers, that he's that he stands out that much in training, and with the way that he speaks to the media and the way that he speaks to Brendan Rodgers, that he's ready to just take that first team football step. The people that I was speaking to last week, or the person that I was speaking to last week, publicly said that he's done with academy football now. He's outgrown it. He's ready to play first team football. So here's your chance. Go and take it at Celtic. Go and make a name for yourself. I know you've had that breakthrough at Manchester City, but get 30, 35, 40 games under your belt alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers. It could be a really good partnership between the two of them. That's my hope. And if Simpson Pusey's to come in, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of people go out the door, maybe on loan, maybe one permanently as well.
Some more questions here. Wiley Bayote, a fantastic moniker. Do you think the problem with bringing in players we want isn't the fee itself, but a rigid wage structure? Now, I think there's a certain element of truth to that when you're kind of looking at players potentially around an £8 million to £10 million mark. Their wages are naturally creeping up, and if Celtic are interested in them in that price range, then a lot of other clubs are too. Celtic are a Champions League level over the last couple of years, so it makes sense that other Champions League level clubs or clubs lower down the divisions clubs lower down the top flight of the top five leagues would be looking at them, and they might have more wages to spend. it's my belief that the wage bill at Celtic's been slightly relaxed in recent years. There is obviously a rigid structure there, but I think people will remember there was a flurry of contract renewals, a lot of contract renewals around it in the same time. In the space of 12 months, there was many players who got new deals who were already on long-term deals, and I think that was Celtic readjusting their wage bill and what players were offered. So I think there's an element of truth to that, but it's also, I think it's a reality of where Celtic are, and in terms of the money Celtic have is enormous in terms of the resources of Scottish football. In a European context, not that enormous, and that is the reality. That's the unfortunate reality of where we are. The inflation in football is dramatic and consistent and frustrating, I think, for Celtic, and again, we all complain as supporters, etc., and want the best for the club, but there are certain realities that the club need to consider as well.
Yes, yeah, and the inflation in football is incredible at the moment. I was listening to a radio show last night and I was hearing some of the fees for players, particularly down south in the English Premier League, and they take you aback for how much teams are spending for players that are good players, but I don't know if they're those elite level players that those fees would have commanded a few years ago. It seems as if that needle's been moved ever so slightly, and that good players are now going for great fees rather than the other way about. It's unfortunate. It's the world that Celtic live in, and it's the world that Celtic operate at the moment, which means they need to be smart with their wages and their scouting, recruitment. But they need to sell that. I think as a club, they need to sell the club as being a great place to continue your development. If you're a young player playing in Champions League football, I'm sure they'll be doing that anyway. I'm sure that's in the initial pitch to players that you can play at a good level. You can play in the Champions League or wherever Celtic are playing in Europe that season, and then progress as a football player. Ideally, you want to see some of these players stay long term, but sometimes the wages get too high and the wages offered elsewhere are too much, and Celtic just simply can't compete with that, both in England and further abroad, in Saudi Arabia, Italy, Germany, etc. So it's a difficult one for Celtic to operate in, but you just want them to be as smart as possible, and maybe move that needle ever so slightly, if that means breaking the wage structure.
It would be easier to take that it's difficult, Ryan. I think if there was any evidence of a plan or any kind of
communication just isn't there, John.
Yeah, it's not just that, or even in their actions, there just doesn't seem to be a cohesive plan when it comes to the transfer windows at the moment.
Yeah,
Matty C digging us up. He's saying, ideal world, these charlatans have had over 6 months to bring a striker in. Listen, Matty, I get it. I think Celtic should have signed a striker in January. I totally understand your viewpoint and get where you're coming from. I'm trying to predict what the club will do, not what I want the club to do, and I'm looking at that situation and the inactivity there, and the kind of messaging that Rodgers putting out there when he's been asked directly multiple times about a striker over the last couple of months, and he consistently says he doesn't say we need a striker. He says we need goals and we need additions to our forward line, which is the front three, and it just makes me think that the pursuit is of wingers rather than an out-and-out striker.
Yeah, and you could actually make the argument that Shin Yamada should have been signed in January if Celtic were so keen on the player, because we know that there's been long-term interest in Shin Yamada. Why would you not sign him in the January off the back of his best J-League season? Coming off the back of that, I think he scored 20 goals in all competitions for Kawasaki. That would have been an ideal time to sign him. And to be fair, he's match fit, so he can come in the summer and play a part. Hopefully, he can come on against Aberdeen at Pittodrie and show what he's all about. But there is that argument that he could have been signed in January, and it might have even been easier to sign him in January, given the fact that the J-League season was over at that point. Just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, Del Boy asking, why is it always doom and gloom? Let's find the joy. I am into finding the joy where there's joy to be found. I very much enjoyed Luke McCowan's impact. The winner was great. The reaction and I thought the energy at Celtic Park on Sunday was excellent. And I think even for Callum McGregor's disallowed goal, that was quite a celebration as well. People are energised for Celtic to move and push forward. I think it's very important to note that despite all the complaining of many Celtic fans this summer, they were right behind the team on Sunday, really behind the team in a big way. And I actually thought stayed with the team well in that second half. I've seen many games against these teams who play a low block, and the moans and groans come out early and never really go away. But the crowd were very into watching Celtic push for that winner against St Mirren, and I think that is a good sign for things to come, at least, Ryan.
Yeah, and they've got to be. Well, they've not got to be, but it's preferential if they stick with the team until the very end. I won't tell any supporter how to act or vent their frustrations if they do have frustrations. But they did stick with the team. They stuck with the team till the end. There was a couple of grumbles here and there. Certainly from where I was sitting, there was. Yeah. That's to be expected. When you're nothing each against St Mirren going into the final 5 minutes. But I do think that the decibels went up a little after that Callum McGregor goal. Yes, there was the goal celebration and the subsequent VAR intervention, but even after that, I think there was a belief in the crowd that the goal was coming. All they needed to do was to stay patient with the team, and thankfully, Luke McCown, as I call him trigger happy, because he's happy to shoot on sight and shoot when required. And if you don't shoot, you don't score. He takes the chance, gets a wicked deflection, and it hits the back of the net. And he enjoyed it. I loved his celebration. I've got to say, he embodies the Celtic supporters on the pitch. I think he's an extension of that, and you could see that in his celebration with the crowd. He absolutely loved that, and it was a really good moment and a relieving moment. It was one of those ones where you were like, Celtic need to fix all the things that are going on off the pitch with their transfers, but right now they need to fix what's going on the pitch, and they did that with the late goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So what else is going on at Celtic? Obviously, we had the Champions League draw yesterday. If you're wanting direct reaction to that, Ryan and Tony were live yesterday with the reaction to the Champions League draw. Obviously, Slovan Bratislava or Kairat from Kazakhstan. Now, a few little bits in the wake of that. We now know the firm date of when Celtic will be playing. Obviously, we don't know who Celtic will be playing at the moment. But the first game will be played on the Wednesday, August 20th. And the return leg will be played on Tuesday, August 26th. That was confirmed by UEFA last night. Celtic are at home first, so they'll host on that Wednesday and then travel away on that Tuesday. If that's Kazakhstan, obviously not ideal. We know that there's a kind of SPFL rule potentially in play. I'm not sure what the cut-off date for that was, or if it's still viable for Celtic to postpone the Livingston game. But a new SPFL rule was initiated for this season where clubs involved in European competition can postpone the third fixture of the Scottish Premiership season to aid them in their quest to make it through into the UEFA League phases. I think Brendan Rodgers was asked about it earlier in the year. He didn't seem that up for it, but if it's a trip to Kazakhstan, then he might be. So when are Kairat and Slovan Bratislava playing? You might be wondering. So their first game is actually tomorrow, Wednesday, and the kickoff is at 4:00 UK time. And then obviously they've got a second leg next Tuesday, and the kickoff time in Bratislava is 7:15 UK time. So I'll be watching the matches, Ryan, and be interested to see how both teams play. And very much, if we're talking about things to look forward to, very much looking forward to that playoff tie.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's a European tie at the end of the day, and it's so important for Celtic to get through that, just because of the excitement that the Champions League brings, not just to the players and to the manager, but to the supporters as well. It really kickstarts your season. Not that it needed kickstarting anyway, but just that excitement stays in and amongst the support when the Champions League draw comes around, because you're automatically looking forward to that. You're glued to your screen. You know that Celtic are going to be in that. I remember last season in particular, there was real excitement with Celtic being in that draw because it was the new system, the new format, and it was great to know that Celtic were there. Obviously, they're due to automatic qualification due to the coefficient points, but they're going to have to work for it this time. And regardless of who it is, yes, I think it was a favourable draw yesterday, on paper at least, but it's still going to be a tough task, and Celtic have got to beat whatever team comes in front of them, whether that's Kairat or Slovan Bratislava. I think in an ideal world, we'd be hoping that Slovan Bratislava get through that, and there's a bit of a reunion from match day 1 of the Champions League last season.
I mean, I would argue Slovan Bratislava a better team, and
I think so too. I think just for logistics, to be honest.
I mean logistics. Yeah, I get it. I do get it. So John Clement's saying the real annoying thing is we are two or three quality signings away from being a really good team. Get it done. That's kind of that's what we're driving at as well, or at least I am today.
Without a doubt, I am too.
Yeah. Joe Allen saying it will take a miracle for Celtic to suddenly turn around and sign 2 or 3 players where we, by and large, collectively as a group, go, oh snap, okay, let's effing go. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's quite a miracle. It will take a lot, and there will need to be the right signings to energise everyone. As Big Dom's kind of put in here, it isn't the danger of allowing this inactivity to continue that we end up in another Ida Engels situation. And I get it. Yeah, I think there's no doubt that it felt like their transfer fees were pushed up last year because their selling clubs were waiting until the last possible moment to drive up the price and put Celtic into a corner, and Celtic were kind of, I think, put into a corner on those players. I think that's undoubted. We know that Engels was identified very early in the window, and obviously Ida was on loan, and it was Brendan Rodgers said on the pitch of Hampden that he wanted to sign Adam Ida for the next year, and it just dragged on too far. And yeah, I think Norwich I think they were willing to do business early in the window for a slightly less fee. Undoubtedly that is a factor, I feel like, and that is, I suppose, a little bit of an underlying concern going into these final 3 weeks of the window.
Yeah, and these teams are well within their right to do that as well, to get the optimum price for their players. If they see that Celtic are waiting until the end of the window, where they know that Celtic will, I don't know if desperate's the right word, but more keen to bring in players towards the end of the window because they need them in and around the squad, then they can put those prices up, and they're well within their rights to do so. They've got to cover themselves to get the best possible fee for their assets. So ideally you would want the deals done early, but Celtic are playing that game where, you know, if they're wanting to save money on players, then ideally you would bring them in earlier on in the window to avoid that hike in prices. But from what it looks like, you know, we're sitting here Tuesday the 5th of August, it's going to be quite late when the players are coming in again, especially with regard to that Champions League qualifier. Clubs know that. Clubs know that Celtic will be in the Champions League qualifiers, and they'll act accordingly. That's just covering themselves and getting the best possible price for their players, and they're well within their rights to do that. They're savvy, and this is what other teams do, and they do it quite well.
Love it, not loving it. They're saying, why did Rodgers not give Yamada game time on Sunday? It's baffling, especially when so many fans looking forward to seeing him and no info of what happened to Inamura. Crazy. Yeah, the Yamada thing. I was a little bit perplexed by it. I'm trying not to read too much into it because I think it's one of those ones you can get carried away. Rodgers is seeing the player at Lennox Town. We don't know what his readiness, if he's adjusting to the pace of what's needed. It was also a must-win moment for Celtic, and I get thrown on Johnny Kenny in that situation is not ideal. A lot of people saying it's Rodgers sending a message to the board. Again, that's intent we're kind of projecting on Rodgers. Without him explaining, I can't really say for sure. I was actually very surprised no one in the press room asked them about Shin Yamada after the game, because I thought it was an obvious question to ask, but it didn't happen. And I guess we will have to wait. I think he will be asked about it on Friday, and I guess we'll see what his answer on Yamada is then.
Yeah, I was quite perplexed that question wasn't asked either. I thought it was a bit of a tap-in terms of asking why a £1.5 million striker didn't make it off the bench, you know, to make his competitive debut for Celtic, especially when Celtic were chasing a goal, and if you see him as a potential first team striker for the season ahead. I guess the one maybe the reason that Rodgers will give is that Johnny Kenny's been in pre-season since the very start, and he wouldn't want Yamada to leapfrog him in the pecking order when Johnny Kenny's been there. He's scored goals in pre-season, and maybe Rodgers can rely on him in the work that he's done off the pitch to do that, to do the business on it. So maybe that's the reasoning that Rodgers would give. But at the same time, you want to see your new strikers come onto the pitch and make an impact. Hopefully that can be the case against Aberdeen at Pittodrie. But yeah, it's one that we'll need more info on before making any judgments, I would say.
Liam Devine good to see a Wu-Tang Clan fan on the channel, Ryan. Liam
Yeah.
Devine saying, this is nothing to do with other teams. This is everything to do with our incompetence. This isn't strategic. Get your heads around that, and we as fans can begin to address it. No argument there, Liam. You know, I'm not. You're coming at us there, but I'm totally on board with you. Like it's
Preaching to the choir.
definitely, yeah. It's more is required. Cash rules everything around me, as it says, Ryan. And Celtic need to get that. They need to get that in their head as well, that they need to be more agile and aggressive in this transfer market, because they do have the resources to do that, and I fully understand that. I'm fully on board with that. So what we laid out today, Ryan, we're expecting these kind of fringe players still, 4 or 5 fringe players to leave, and we're expecting 2 or 3 players to come in. That's the long and short of it. Who that is anyone's guess. We're struggling, I think, Ryan, in terms of like tangible targets, and that's fine. Like I'm not one that if there's a lack of targets, I'm panicking, because Celtic will have their targets. They're just not being reported on, and that is what that is. I think we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. There's a lot to do, Ryan. There's still a lot to do, and I think that's important to stress. And as long as this kind of inactivity goes on, I mean, even with the thing about the Simpson Peasy thing, I think that delays can happen. What it's frustrating for Celtic fans is it seems like another sign of Celtic failing to get things done, even if they're blameless in this particular situation. It's not a great sign that Simpson Peasy's been in Glasgow for about 4 or 5 days and still hasn't been announced as a Celtic player, and there's no real communication on it. There's no real indication on it, and I get that that's frustrating for players. It's another indicator of, things just don't seem to be getting done at Celtic at the moment.
It's all about optics, isn't it? And
Yeah.
from the outside looking in, you see a player in Celtic gear and a Celtic tracksuit training after the game, and yet he's not been announced. So automatically your default position in your head would be to be frustrated because they've not announced him yet, despite him taking part in activities, despite him attending a game. He will come through the door. We know that. I mean, we would hope that it would be today that he gets announced, because he was in the gear on Sunday. It's now Tuesday. You want that to be signed, sealed and delivered as soon as possible. If they've got that clearance, then I don't see what they're waiting for. And they need to, even just for a bit of a feel-good factor, put that out on social media. A new player coming in, bring a wee bit of positivity, especially if he brings a good interview, that unfazed nature and attitude that he's got to things, that could resonate well with the supporters, having a confident defender in the club. So yeah, I think for a bit of an uplift, I think that's announcing, if it can be done, then announce Simpson Pusey as soon as possible. But make sure you're right, make sure you get that clearance, is basically what I'm trying to say. Try to cover all bases here, without getting too frustrated at the transfer dealings, but easier said than done.
I'm bringing Liam back in here because he makes a point at the end that I want to address a little bit. It's not all about optics, though. We look like a very good team versus a good team who'd sold and not replaced their striker and winger, because that's what we are. And I think that's fair. And actually, we've got more on that coming on the channel. So myself and Hamish, who you know of the briefings, are starting a new weekly show where it's just myself and Hamish every single week. It's not live, it's pre-recorded. It gives us a little time to have a little bit more structure to the show and go a little bit more in depth and things. And look, one of the things we look at in the first show, which goes out tonight or this evening about 5 o'clock, is that when you look at that game against Slovan Bratislava last year, the 5-1 game, Kuhn very influential in that game, very influential in that match. Kyogo obviously scores as well. In fact, Kuhn sets up Kyogo for Celtic's second goal that breaks open the whole match. And so when I'm looking and thinking about facing Slovan Bratislava this year, the fact that Kyogo and Kuhn aren't in that team, I think, is a real big problem, a real big problem, and a little bit of a worry, to be frank. So we go into a lot of that. As I say, it's a new show, a new weekly show, a new weekly podcast for people to get. And I know not everyone can tune in every day, and this is just a way for people to have something they can watch every single week. And as I say, it's myself and Hamish every single week, just chatting about Celtic, just nattering really. These live shows are great. I love the live shows, but it can be a challenge to manage the live chat, talk about Celtic at the same time, and do all that. So this is just a little bit of a different kind of show that people might appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Tune in, guys, once it drops, for sure. I certainly will
Yeah,
be.
and we've got plenty going on the site. We've got Alan Morrison looking at our transfer strategy over the last few years. That's going up around lunchtime. We've got more stuff. We've got analysis from Sunday going up as well tomorrow morning. So we've got a lot of stuff on the website, celticway.co.uk/subscribe. It's £1 for 6 months at the moment. It is a bargain. There's a lot of good stuff on there that I think people, but by what they're saying on the live chat and everything, would enjoy the stuff that we're putting out on the website as well. So definitely try and check that out if you can. Welsh Ball asking, where is Hamish these days? Like, as I was saying, like, we're doing a weekly show with him now. Hamish is the Celtic AM channel as well, which is going great guns, and we're bringing in Hamish and to kind of use them in a little bit of a different way, and still enjoying speaking to them. I've been podcasting with Hamish for 10 years, Ryan, can you believe? 10 years. We did our first podcast in 2016. So this is just a way to kind of continue my podcasting relationship with Hamish, and as I say, on a weekly basis from this point onwards.
Yeah, I remember listening to the Grand Old Pod a couple of years ago, so I've been an avid listener for a few years now. I'll certainly be listening to the new one.
Yeah, okay. So we've got a lot going on, as I say, on the website. We'll wrap it up there, guys. It's been great. The live chat's been great today. Very lively. Yep. Good to get your input and be able to respond to it. And hopefully Celtic deliver what we're all talking about here. Few more fringe players out, few players in, and I think the thing is, Ryan, sorry, I don't want to extend the show. I keep doing an outro and keep going into something else. But the thing is, and as we touched on today, the fans are desperate to get behind Celtic this season. There's a real urgency to bring that excitement, you know? And I think it's just waiting on Celtic to actually deliver on that and back that as well. And that's what we need.
I think we're hungry as well. We want to back the team in the best possible way. We want to be as positive
We're
as
not
we
hungry,
can.
we're starving.
Yeah. do you know, I want to be as positive as I can because that's my default position. I want to be positive about everything to do with Celtic. They need to give us something. They need to give us something to be positive about in terms of off-field things. Yes, they got the win at the weekend, but I want some positivity in the transfer market. I want to see those signings that are going to rejuvenate and revolutionise this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I'm going to end the show for a third time here, so I'm just going to say goodbye this time, everyone. Great to see everyone. Great. Thanks for joining us in the live chat. Thanks for joining us in the comments below. Let us know what you're feeling about the transfer window in the comments below. And we'll try and bring in some... We always bring in live comments. We'll try and bring in comments from below the line at some point in future as well, just in fairness sake, because not everyone can watch live at 10 o'clock in the middle of a weekday, Ryan. People have stuff to do, you know? Okay, right. We'll be back this evening with this new weekly show with Hamish, and we'll be back live tomorrow at 10 a.m. as always. We'll see you next time on the Celtic